The question of where a new Fallout game will be set is one that always intrigues me as a fan of the series. It's been 10 years since the release of Fallout 4, and we probably will still have to wait a long while before we get even a trailer or let alone any actual information on the next Fallout game, especially its location. But with that being said, there's nothing wrong with some speculation of Fallout 5, and everyone is mainly speculating where Fallout 5 will be set. There are many fair shares of both assumptions and also opinions on where the game's going to take place. Yeah, so I was just reviewing some footage here, and yeah, I'm not quite sure why these popped up. Does that say boot test? So I thought it's time that I only do what's right and share mine as well. Before I continue with the video, however, I would ask that you all like and subscribe with the bell notifications on so you can be updated when I post videos and content. I really would appreciate this as it would help the channel grow. I thank you all so much for the support of the last video. It truly means a lot to me, and I hope that this video does well too. Thank you guys ever so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below where you think Fallout 5 will be set and enjoy the video. Thank you guys. Okay, so first things first, we need to talk about the options of where the game could actually be set. To do this, let's first take a look at where other Fallout games have taken place. If we look at this map that I have so kindly made, or got off the internet, we can see that Fallout 1 took place on the west coast in California. Fallout 2 took place on the west coast in California also. Then, finally, Fallout New Vegas
the GOAT! The GOAT!
also took place on the west coast in the state of the Mojave Desert, and New Vegas on the west coast. So 2 out of 3 in California, all on the west coast. Fantastic job, guys. Now moving on to Bethesda's Fallout games. Fallout 3
It was perfect. Perfect.
takes place on the east coast of the USA in Washington, D.C. Then Fallout 4
I mean, it's alright, like...
also takes place on the east coast, of course, this time in Boston. Now finally, we have Fallout 76.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Which takes place in West Virginia, which is located closer to the east coast of America than the west, but it's not actually on the east coast. Warning to all people watching this who may be American, I'm a British person, so don't know all your states, so apologies if I get absolutely anything wrong. Please correct me in the comments down below, thank you. So now we have our map of where all the main Fallout games take place. Mind you, it's worth adding on or noting down that there are multiple DLCs that take place around the US in other minor locations. However, the main focus is on these main games, these main big Fallout titles. Because we know that Bethesda most likely, don't know what happened with Fallout 1 and 2 there, but most likely aren't going to go back to these same locations. Or maybe they are, like I said with Fallout 1 and 2, both being set in California. Maybe the East Coast and the West Coast are Bethesda's dumping ground for Fallout games. Because I think this map tells us that the most likely candidate of where Fallout 5 will be set is either on the east coast of America or the west coast, just judging off of where games have been set before, as that's where most games are set. However, not all of them. Now with that all being said, I do have some ideas about which cities could potentially be used on both the east coast and the west coast to create a host for Fallout 5. I will now say what locations I personally think are most likely for Fallout 5. For now, I'm just going to say what cities I think will be on each coast, and then I'll explain why later on in the video. So with that being said, first let's start off with the west coast. The most likely city would be San Francisco. Then I think on the other side of America for the east coast, without a doubt the most likely location for a game to take place and be set would be New York City. Finally, I think that a Fallout game could also take place in Nebraska. Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a stretch and that it came out of absolutely nowhere, at least for that last one anyway, but trust me, it makes sense. I mean, not really for that last one, Nebraska, but still, maybe I just want it to be set in Nebraska, okay? These are my opinions after all. I mean, the first two I actually have some logic behind, but...
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Hey, maybe I just want a Fallout game in Nevada. I'll explain later. And I can hear you all. But truth. You didn't mention Fallout outside of the US.
That actually is pretty funny.
Yeah, like that's ever going to happen. Even though it would be very cool, and we have a lot of evidence for that, I don't think we're ever going to get a Fallout game outside the US, which is... Anyway, now that I have said where I think the games will be located, or could take place, I'm going to go over the reasons why I think this is, and why I think they would make for appealing Fallout 5 locations. Now let me start by talking about the option that I think looks the most likely, and also the option that I think would make the most amount of sense for Bethesda as of the time right now. The option I'm talking about, of course, is the East Coast option, of where Fallout 5 would take place in San Francisco. Now let me start by actually talking about all the evidence for this, as there actually is quite a lot. Well, there's not quite a lot. There's just actually evidence for this, whereas the other ones, there's not a lot at all. We know that Bethesda do have interests in the city of San Francisco, because they have gone on record to ask Obsidian to pull lines from Fallout New Vegas before it came out, which was supposed to be talking about how San Francisco had been blown off the map and completely wiped out, being reduced to a crater in the ground. Bethesda specifically asked for these lines to be cut and removed from the game. This clearly shows they have plans, or at least at some point thought they had plans, for the city at the time. In terms of what plans they wanted to do then and now, we still don't know. But I think it would and could work for Fallout 5, for a Fallout 5 setting, and would make sense for a number of reasons. It's on the East Coast to start with, and the last mainline Fallout game, Fallout 4, was set on the West Coast, so it makes sense that now Bethesda would switch it up and go back to the East Coast to see what's happening on that side of the country. It would also make sense just setting it in this area due to the amount of sheer hype around Fallout New Vegas that is now present, especially after the phenomenal release of the Fallout TV show. People are dying, and I mean literally dying, to know what state New Vegas is like, who's in control, and how everyone's favorite faction, the NCR, are doing down there.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
I'm doing fine, thanks for asking. What about you?
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
You say that every time I walk by. Blink twice if you need help.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you...
Do you actually want a nuclear winter? Let's see if I can make that happen for you.
wish for a nuclear winter.
You gotta be kidding me.
Across there, rather, actually. I think from a hype point of view, it would make most sense to set Fallout 5 and the East Coast side of America in a large city like, or in this case, of San Francisco, which is bound to have a large NCR presence. And I don't know, I've always thought that San Francisco could be a potentially very cool, intricate, and interesting location for a Fallout game to be actually set. It's a cool city, it's got a very different vibe to any other city we've seen in Fallout, and I think it could work incredibly well. Now, speaking of factions, since I just mentioned the NCR, it could be a good time to talk about faction distribution of the east side of the US. So if we take a look at this map, we will see all the major factions that I think are at least in control of the USA right now. Now, don't get your ass hair in a twist. I'm very aware that I'm missing a lot of factions from this map, and some faction sizes may control bigger or smaller amounts of land. However, for now, I'm just going to be focused on the more large-scale factions, so this is why it's very dumbed down. You're not getting any side factions in control, like raider groups or the Nuka World Raiders. No, this is just main faction stuff. Because, oh my days, do you know how hard it is to find a map where Fallout fans can consistently agree what factions control what parts of America? I'm not kidding. It was so hard to even find this map. It's you know what it is? It's the NCR and Caesar's Legion. Every single map you look at, they have it completely different for what land they control. Sometimes Caesar's Legion controls like a tiny amount. Sometimes it's huge. Sometimes it's reversed for the NCR. It's that part. It's the East Coast, Caesar's Legion, and the NCR. They completely divide the Fallout community, and I don't know why. Just do it. Just Google Fallout maps, because, oh my goodness, no one can agree where anything is. But anyway, this is what I think, and this map represents how I would currently view the status of factions in the Fallout world and where they control in America at the minute, at least. However, now, that being said, I'm going to use this as the base map for the video, because it basically covers all the factions that I need, and it does a really good job at covering both the East Coast and the West Coast for the map of factions. Just as a quick disclaimer, if my voice sounds a little bit off, I got ill halfway through recording this, so that's why I sound a little bit groggy. So yeah, but if you can put up with that, please do continue watching the video. Now let's talk about what factions and what sort of game setting San Francisco would make for Fallout 5. I think one option we have for San Francisco is that it would be completely under the control of the NCR, and therefore there is a lot that can be done with this. We could potentially see a Fallout game setting where the city is in fact not a full wreck of super mutant ghouls, raiders, and atomic bomb leftovers and radiation, but a thriving community of people working together to rebuild under the control of the NCR in their new capital city, San Francisco, of course. This would see you not as a vault dweller but as a settler, when all of a sudden the second main faction of this Fallout 5 would invade, causing a war. That faction, of course, being none other than Caesar's Legion. This time, of course, under new leadership, but still following the traditional teachings of the old Caesar. This would throw the city into a chaotic war of chaos and make for non-stop fighting. Now, this is where the player would take over and make their own decisions about the area, choosing to work with the NCR, fighting back against the Legion and other factions now trying to grasp control of San Francisco, or of course, choosing to fight with Caesar's Legion, trying to wipe out and kill anyone in San Francisco and take it for themselves. If you chose the NCR, you would now be trying to rebuild a broken city filled with different settlements scattered all over the place, whilst also trying to fight Caesar's Legion. This would make for other factions, such as the Great Khans, to also try and take their fair share of course, other land, and other large factions, such as maybe the Brotherhood of Steel. And of course, like I said, Caesar's Legion would try to take as much land as they could. Now, the other option is that we set our Fallout 5 in San Francisco, but this time, the NCR have only just got there, and so it's a mess. A mess of ghouls, raiders, possibly super mutants if it's lore friendly, Great Khans, different smaller factions, absolutely everywhere, and now you as the player must make the decision to try and help the NCR or the other factions. Of course, if you try to help the NCR, you will be fighting none other than also Caesar's Legion, but also the Brotherhood of Steel. Yes, I think the Brotherhood of Steel should have a major part in Fallout 5 if it's in San Francisco, and I think it would work very well because this would be a lot more chaotic. This NCR would have never been in control, they're simply trying to take control, while so is Caesar's Legion, the Great Khans, and the Brotherhood of Steel also. I think that both of these Fallout games would make for great games. I think for definite, however, if they go with San Francisco path, which I must say I hope they do, and it's the most appealing for me and the one that I think they do the most out of all the different cities for that matter, they must include both the NCR and Caesar's Legion. It is an absolute must. It has to be done. I think that this would be the do-all end-all for both of these factions' great rivalries, with, if you picking the NCR, completely wiping out and destroying Caesar's Legion, or at least destroying them so much that they're no longer a large-scale faction, but just a small side faction, much like Brotherhood of Steel were in Fallout New Vegas themselves, a reduced faction after so much war between them and the NCR that they were almost nothing. I think a similar sort of thing would have to occur with the NCR and Caesar's Legion if you pick the NCR path. Now, the opposite would also happen if you pick Caesar's Legion. I think without a doubt the NCR should be wiped out, and I think they should fully lose control of the East Coast and be reduced to pretty much nothing. I wouldn't even give them anything. I would say that's the end of the NCR. So that's how I would personally do it. People might say that's a bit extreme because the NCR are in control of so much land. If they really lost San Francisco, which at this point they haven't even got yet, would it really matter? Probably not, but still, I think that would be very interesting. I mean, the same can be said for Caesar's Legion, of course. They have outstanding numbers. I think it's even said in New Vegas that they have more numbers than the NCR, so it would be a bit unrealistic that because they lose this battle, they're just wiped out. But still, I would like it to be a do-all end-all. I'd like some wrapping up of both the East and West Coast and some nice plot thread which could intertwine nicely. Now, the other major faction that I talked about and mentioned was, of course, the BOS, which I think should be a faction you can side with. They should be able to take San Francisco and have their own vision for the city. This version of the BOS would be more afraid of technology than previous ones. This would be the version we actually saw in Fallout New Vegas, or one very similar, a version that had been so beaten down that they were afraid and hiding, but still holding on to their core beliefs, except this version, once again, would have built their forces up to be significant again. Oh, my days. Sorry about that. However, this version's numbers would be significantly brought up again, so they're an actual capable fighting force. Not huge numbers, not like Caesar's Legion or NCR numbers, still significantly lower than them, but significant enough that they can actually take on other factions now once again. If you go with the BOS, it would be brutal. They would wipe out everyone. This would be a more scared BOS, so the more scared Brotherhood of Steel we have, I think the more brutal they are. So you'd wipe out Caesar's Legion, the NCR, any smaller faction that stands in your way like the Great Khans or any raider groups, you would wipe them out completely and take San Francisco and thus the East Coast for the Brotherhood of Steel. Then for like a fourth and fifth faction, you could always have factions such as the Great Khans or even the White Legs. I think that both of these could make for interesting faction endings, and I think that we obviously need a bad guy option, so the Great Khans would be that generic sort of bad guy option, even though they could also have their own motives for San Francisco. And I think overall San Francisco could make for an awesome Fallout setting. It's, like I said, it's something we've never really seen before. It's really cool city. If they do go that route, like I said, they must include the NCR and they must include Caesar's Legion. It is a must. They have to do it. And in my opinion, they must try to reminisce somewhat on the Fallout New Vegas setting. I want this game to be kind of inspired and a kind of an homage to Fallout New Vegas, because I think it's only right that they do so. We're returning to the East Coast, which we haven't done for so long, and we're going to have factions like Caesar's Legion, the NCR, Brotherhood of Steel, all factions that appeared in Fallout New Vegas. It only makes sense that this game feels a bit New Vegas. I personally, like I said earlier, would also love for them to have the player be a settler or someone like a courier and not a vault dweller for this game, as I think it would be more interesting and more fun experience if you're someone from completely outside coming in, but not so outside it's like, oh, I have to learn what super mutants and what this is and what this is, and you're like a complete idiot who's never done it before. So many Fallout games vault dweller stuff, and it's completely fine, but I think more interesting when you don't know your character's background, you just know he was a courier, or he was a settler, or he did at some point do this. I think that makes for a way more interesting story. Or hell, even have it so that the player could choose, like they can in Starfield, what their sort of background is. Maybe choose, have the choice if you're a vault dweller or not. Because if you're not a vault dweller, if the game makes you not be a vault dweller and you were just a courier, you can still do vault stuff. I mean, Fallout New Vegas has some of my personal favorite vault related quests and vault mysteries and experiments ever, and I love it. So I think personally you should not play as a vault dweller if they go with the East Coast San Francisco setting. So yeah, that is my thoughts on a San Francisco Fallout game setting. The second option for Fallout 5 is to set the game, of course, on the West Coast side of America in New York this time. New York has been a Fallout setting people have been asking for literally years, and it would make a lot of sense if Bethesda went this route, because the last mainline Fallout game they made was, of course, on the West Coast. So maybe they will want to continue this route of doing West Coast based Fallout games, even though I did just say the complete opposite for the reason they might want to do an East Coast Fallout game for San Francisco. Hey, come on, sometimes you have to play devil's advocate. They might want to stay to the West Coast so that they can wrap up as many plot lines in that region as they can. There is wide round fan support for a New York setting Fallout game, and it would make sense because, well, it's New York. Bethesda's marketing has always worked because they target very recognizable American cities such as Washington DC, Boston, and in Obsidian's case, New Vegas, to get Americans to want to play Fallout games. And well, actually, global fans to want to play Fallout games for that fact. A lot of European fans know what Washington looks like, they know what Boston looks like, and they certainly know what New Vegas looks like. And this would of course work for New York City, as in my opinion, as a Europeaner, as a British person.
Good morning, Glenn.
You tell us something your mum doesn't know.
Yeah.
It's the most recognizable American city in the entire world, and one of, if not the most recognizable cities in the entire world in general. I mean, it's New York City. And I think because it's New York City, just about everyone and their mother would love to see a Fallout game set there. I mean, I certainly would. The amount of routes they could go in terms of story, setting, art direction for a New York-based Fallout is insane. There are so many different cool and intricate things they could do, and I am a huge fan and huge supporter of that type of setting. Once again, similar to San Francisco, it's a very different type of setting. I don't think we've ever had a Fallout game where the entire game would basically just be city. It would basically just be an entire city because, you know, and it depends how big the map is, I suppose, but New York is huge. It would be hard, in my opinion, for them to scale it down so that you could fit outside areas of New York. So in my opinion, it would have to be a bit of a Fallout London case where it is just a huge city, and we all saw how popular Fallout London is, so I don't think they would mind doing that at all, in my opinion. Now let's look at the evidence for why they would want to do this. And while there's not as much evidence to a Fallout New York setting in the next Fallout game as there is a Fallout San Francisco setting, there is still a bit of compelling evidence. For example, a lot of people don't know this, but originally Fallout 4 had planned to be set in New York. It was going to be the Fallout New York setting.
The first thing is for us is figure out where the hell is this game set, and it wasn't Boston originally. So it was set somewhere else, and I still have a design doc in my desk, original design doc.
Emma's design doc focusing on a New York-based Fallout was one idea that the leads were floating
around. In fact, they had gone so far to start concept art, general art, and even start making character design and characters. We know this because the character of Nick Valentine is actually taken from the New York concept and placed into Boston. He's the only thing that was carried over from the original New York idea is Nick Valentine, who of course appears in Fallout 4 and is very likable for that matter. Now, though that is pretty much the only evidence, and though there is a lot less evidence for a New York setting than there is, of course, a San Francisco setting, like I said, I would argue that the New York evidence is more compelling because this tells us that not only do they want to do a New York setting, but they went as far to start the proceeds of making a Fallout game in New York. For whatever reason they decided to change that direction, I'm not sure, but we know that they were going to do this. This is something they had planned to do, something they weren't just considering, but were following through on. So it would make sense that going from Boston down to New York, that would make a lot of sense for me because not only are they very close to each other, so they may want to wrap up some plot threads, depending on how close in time period and Fallout lore they set the games together, they might want to wrap up obviously plot threads from Fallout 4, but it would also just make sense in a general scope that they go from Boston, which is just a little bit above New York, down to New York. That would make a lot of sense for me in direction, and especially considering they're already on the West Coast in terms of Fallout lore at the minute, if we don't count 76, it would make sense that they do New York, which is a game, once again, I reinforce, that they already had started technically not physical development on, but concept development on. So it's very possible, not as possible as San Francisco, but it's very possible. And let's face it, New York would be an incredible Fallout game. New York in any game setting basically works, but for Fallout, it would work tremendously well. Now let me talk to you about the factions in the West Coast, which would make up our Fallout 5 set in New York, and also what sort of game we would have in general, as I think that's important. I'd like to start by saying, just straight off the bat, if they did a Fallout New York, I would rather this time the player came from a vault. I would personally like this just because I think it would make for a cool experience, that you just have to wait that little bit longer before seeing the big reveal of this incredible city, this destroyed, immaculate city. I mean, New York would probably be the biggest city for a Fallout game and also the biggest name. It's New York City, so imagine that hugely cinematic reveal when you're a new vault dweller stepping out of a vault for the very first time, and behold, you see that absolute cinema of the destroyed New York, chaos, destruction, and the beauty of the Fallout world. So many Fallout games set in vaults have that incredible moment where the player steps out of the vault for the first time, and it's in all Bethesda games really. It's that gotcha moment of, oh my goodness, this game is not only gorgeous, but you've completely sold me on the setting instantly, and I really would like to see Fallout 5 have that, at least in terms of a vault dweller setting, if we're going with New York. I also think it would make sense, as you're in a large city like New York, there's going to be a decent few vaults. I mean, I would at least think there would be a decent few vaults, especially not just like vault tech ones, but also just either company made or man-made vaults. I think would make a lot of sense. I mean, obviously vault tech I think would have heavy presence in New York because it's such a huge city and you think they want to capitalize on that. And if we look at other Fallout games, the distribution of vaults seems to be a lot higher within cities. So when we look at places like New Vegas, okay, fine, the vaults aren't actually in the cities themselves, but they're in the New Vegas area. Boston, and of course even Washington DC, they all have a lot of vaults within their actual cities, other than New Vegas, kind of. I think this game would see New York in a mess of many different factions, all trying to take different parts of the huge city. I definitely think that there needs to be a New York-based faction. Few new New York-inspired factions, actually, for that matter, would definitely be something that I think is very cool and obviously unique to the New York experience. And they would obviously have their own motives and things they want to do for the city, and you could obviously take that route and side with them, of course. Then I think the other main factions that should be a part of this particular Fallout game should be particularly Fallout 4's BOS and Fallout 4's Minutemen. They should be the two front runners of the show, I would say. I would love to see this Fallout take place just a few, maybe 10-ish years, actually, a decade after Fallout 4. In my ideal world, in my head canon, I suppose, the Minutemen ending is canon, where the Institute is destroyed and the Railroad and Brotherhood of Steel are left alone. In this head canon, in my belief, I think the BOS would have gotten another assignment. They would have seen the Commonwealth as pretty much being sorted. They don't need to attack the Minutemen, and the Railroad kind of will go extinct eventually through synths eventually fading out. So I think maybe they leave a garrison there, but then they fly off. They take the Prydwen and they fly off, and they get a new assignment to take New York for whatever reason and try and establish a heading at New York. I think it would be extremely cool if Elder Maxon's Brotherhood of Steel linked up or established connection once again with the Capital Wastelands BOS, Lions' Brotherhood of Steel. I think that would be extremely cool. And from there, they would both have to take New York together. However, there'd be a big issue with this. Now, Elder Maxon's Brotherhood of Steel and Lions' Brotherhood of Steel are two hugely different Brotherhood of Steels. I don't even think Lions would be alive at this point, to be honest, but still, just their Brotherhood of Steel part, the Capital Wasteland branch of the Brotherhood of Steel would be hugely different factions. So I think an internal civil war would be extremely cool, where they were trying to take New York. There was some sort of huge disagreement between Elder Maxon's more violent BOS that want to destroy and not take, and Lions' more preservative BOS, in which it saw them clash and go to civil war. So I think you should have the option to side with Lions' BOS or Elder Maxon's. That would be really cool, because they're each going to have different visions for New York, and I think that would make for interesting gameplay. So your options there would be you could side with Lions, obviously, and take out Elder Maxon, or you could side with Elder Maxon and take out Lions, even though Lions probably wouldn't be alive, so you'd need a different leader, but the ideologies remain the same from each different splinter group. Then the other main choice, the other main faction choice for the player would, of course, be Fallout 4's Minutemen. In my headcanon, once again, the Minutemen became extremely strong. This is a Minuteman who kind of made the Commonwealth and Boston sustainable. It's like almost like a paradise, almost like California is to a lot of people with the NCR. It's safe, it's stable, and the Minutemen, most importantly, built their faction numbers up, their military strength, their power. So they move. It only makes sense that they would now want to spread their liberties of peace and security down a little bit down to New York, in which I think you could then side with the Minutemen. And from there, there's a lot of interesting things that could happen. I think the Minutemen and Brotherhood of Steel would have to clash, but I think picking the Minutemen ending, you could definitely get an ending where it's like a coalition between the Minutemen take half and Lions' Brotherhood take half, because I don't think the Minutemen necessarily disagree with Lions' Brotherhood at all, actually. So maybe there's like some dialogue options there you can do to manage to get like a parlay between the two factions and then team up to take down Elder Maxons, or you could just kill all of them. I think that would be interesting. And from there, obviously, it's the player's choice of what they want to do. I must say, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think another really cool faction that, once again, was not given enough love in Fallout 4, which could be in Fallout New York, is the Gunners. How cool would it be if the Gunners had a huge play already established in New York? Perhaps they could be the 5th or actual 6th faction for Fallout 5, in which the player can team up with the Gunners and actually try to take New York. The Gunners perhaps already have a huge established force there, and thus it would make it the easiest option. Maybe the Gunners' headquarters are there. I think that could be really interesting too. Obviously from there, it's the player's choice. I also just think the overall setting of New York is incredible. I think there's so many cool, wacky, fun quests you could do, and I would definitely love this Fallout more personally for me. I think because I definitely want to see what happens more on the West Coast. Coast, but both are interesting. I think the ending to this Fallout could be a lot more ambiguous. You could have different factions maybe not be destroyed, but just splinter off into littler factions, and there doesn't have to be a defined ending. You could even have a New York faction win, and I think that could make for a great ending. I just want to see somewhere it be confirmed that the Minutemen are alive and good. That's what I would like. Either way, I think this would make for a great Fallout experience, and I would be down for this sort of game, but this is definitely my sort of headcanon. But let me know what you think. I think it'd make for a great story, but I might be completely wrong, but let me know, guys. Okay, finally, let's talk about the last option, and this is the Nebraska option for Lincoln. Now, let's start by talking about all the evidence we have for this setting, because there is actually zero. There is none. There is no evidence that there will be a Fallout game, a Fallout 5 set in Nebraska in Lincoln. But let me still take my time to explain why I have chosen this very strange and what seems like random location for Fallout 5. Now, in my opinion, the Fallout world and lore right now has two main storylines, three if you count the TV show, but two main ones. You have the West Coast area where you have the NCR in California fighting it out with factions such as Caesar's Legion and the Brotherhood of Steel, and then you have the East Coast, which is Boston, Capital Wasteland, where you have factions like the Brotherhood of Steel once again, and the Minutemen, and other factions such as the Enclave, all taking place in areas such as the Capital Wasteland, aka Washington DC, and Boston, aka the Commonwealth. I think because we have these two main stories, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, it would make sense that we have a more centralized story that covers what's happening in Central America. Now, I know Nebraska isn't the most central state, but I must say I think it would be a perfect fit for this kind of smaller scale Fallout game. Now, like I said, this story would be smaller than both the East Coast ones and the West Coast ones, but it would give the fans a good insight into how Central America is doing and what's happening in that area. And I would have the only returning faction for this area to be a very small part of the Enclave, or I suppose a very small part of the Brotherhood of Steel, as it would technically fall in their land, so a tiny part of them. I think that the series has made it very clear that they're not completely done with the Enclave, and I think if you're going to give the Enclave power again, it should be here, in a central spot in America. It also makes sense because we know that the most amount of Enclave are kind of in this area, sort of, so it would kind of make sense. That being said, also, the Brotherhood of Steel are in that kind of area, so I suppose they should also come over, but still. Now, other than that, I would actually fill Lincoln with completely new factions. I wouldn't have any other returning ones unless they were like really small factions or enemy types like super mutants. I wouldn't have any returning. I would have other factions that have their own motives and have their own plans for America. I think a new established story would work really well to keep the world of Fallout fresh. But other than that, I don't really know what sort of game this would be or what I would want it to be. I think the player could start as a Vault Dweller, but I also think they could not start as a Vault Dweller and it would work perfectly fine. I think this Fallout should definitely have lots of new, fun, interesting factions that are well written, as this could spice up the lore and keep things fresh. But I'm really not sure other than that, and I'm not really sure what these factions would be. So I'm going to ask you guys now. I know this is a very random one, and this doesn't really fit with the format of the video, but I thought I'd throw it in there because I'd like three main storylines, and I think East Coast, West Coast, and a Central America story would work really well for the game. So I'm going to ask you guys now, what sort of factions would you put in Nebraska Lincoln? Let me know down in the comments below what these factions' motives would be, what they would look like, and what they would be based off, and I'll make sure to read the comments. Thanks, guys. There you go. That is the video, and I want to thank you all very much for watching and staying to the end of the video. If you did like it, I would ask that you like, hit the bell, and subscribe. I want to take the moment to thank you guys so much for the support of the last video. It was incredible. It's on like 8K views as of the time of recording this outro, and I really want to thank you for that. It means an incredible amount to me that people watch the content. It also helps me generate income and make it so I can do it again, so I really appreciate that, guys. It means a lot. I love your comments, I love the support, and I love when you disagree as well, so I can see what the criticisms are. So please do comment down below. I'm very aware that some of the clips of the videos I would have used are wrong in this video, and I'm also very aware I probably have gotten East and West Coast mixed up a lot throughout the video. So end of the video, if you've made it this far and you still want to complain now that I've apologized, you can. But yeah, I am sorry about that. Thank you guys ever so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Make sure you're staying safe, guys, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.